Euranet Plus Panorama is a weekly review of European news broadcast by our network of EU radio stations.
I'm Jo, and you're listening to Euranet Plus Panorama. Agriculture is never far from the spotlight in the sphere of European politics, and farmers are doing their utmost to keep it there, with a continuing wave of protests. On Monday, the 23rd of September, at the Agriculture Council in Brussels, the European Commission pledged to continue with its process of simplifying the rules affecting farmers. The Strategic Dialogue on the Future of EU Agriculture presented its final report earlier in September. One of its recommendations is to adapt the bloc's Keystone Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP as we like to call it. Following a debate on the subject at last week's plenary in Strasbourg, France's EU radio asked French S&D member Christophe Clergeau about the farmers' protests and the CAP. Clergeau starts by saying that the time for change has come, that we need a real overhaul, a reinvention of Europe's agricultural policy. But what does this mean in concrete terms?
We need to
change the very reasons for helping farmers. This report says that we must first help small farms, the family and multi-purpose farms, and do more for those that are most vulnerable. If we want to keep farming alive throughout Europe, this is absolutely essential. The report also says that we need new financial tools to support changes in farming practices and to pay for services rendered to the environment. And that's a message I think many farmers have been waiting for. And finally, without going into detail, I think this is a report with a balanced vision of how to boost agricultural production. The job of a farmer is first and foremost to produce. This is the first time in a very long time, for example, that food insecurity has been mentioned in a report on agricultural policies.
And on the subject of food security, Clergeau has strong words for the European executive on what he sees as unfair competition.
La Commission est en retard d'une guerre. Elle continue à défendre le libre-échange.
The Commission is late for a war. It continues to defend free trade. But what everyone is asking for today, and this was all the groups in the Parliament, is equality, fairness, a fair exchange, and that we don't allow banned products to enter Europe. This means that farmers outside Europe cannot use products that farmers in Europe are not allowed to use. No, we need to put an end to these distortions of competition. Put in place what we call mirror clauses, ensuring equal treatment in Europe and outside Europe. And, in my view, we should stop including agriculture in free trade. Agriculture is a question of food sovereignty. We need to be able to produce most of the food Europeans need in Europe, without pitting European farmers against farmers in the rest of the world.
Sans mettre en concurrence les agriculteurs européens et ceux du reste du monde.
This week, Germany's Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture has unveiled its latest nutrition report. When presenting the findings on Tuesday, Federal Agriculture Minister Cem Özdemir also touched on the future of the CAP. He underlined the fact that agricultural incentives really do need to promote farmers' involvement in key policy areas such as climate protection. AMS reports.
In view of the EU's enlargement strategy, it is absolutely clear that the current system is reaching its limits. Imagine the number of hectares that we have in Ukraine. I'm not saying that Ukraine will join the European Union during the next Commission's term of office, but you must prepare seriously for this eventuality. And if serious preparations are being made, then the next CAP will have to take this into account. This inevitably means that we have to shift the remuneration system towards public money for public services. I'm talking about public services provided by our agricultural industry in Germany and elsewhere. Better climate protection, better biodiversity and better animal welfare must bring economic benefits for farmers. It has to pay off for them.
Farmers and Europe's farming industry as a whole are facing great hardship right now. The proliferation of farmers' protests is testament to this, and the challenges just keep coming. Take animal diseases, for example. Belgian network RTBF broadcasts an interview with Wallonia's new agriculture minister, Anne-Catherine Delk, on the subject of blue tongue disease. something that Belgium raised at Monday's Agriculture Council. Bluetongue is an insect-borne virus that affects sheep, cows and other ruminants. But since it's still relatively little discussed, can we really call it a crisis yet? Dalk, a former young farmer herself, thinks we can.
Huge numbers of deaths on sheep farms, many miscarriages of malformed calves on beef farms. Yes, indeed, farms haven't faced this many losses for at least the last 15 years, so it really is a crisis.
And what does she hope to accomplish by raising the issue at the Agriculture Council?
In terms of aid, I've made use of all the European avenues. I can take action through the common agricultural policy. Certain measures make counts of animals, so when animals have died as a result of force majeure through this epidemic, then these animals can be counted. Then there's the whole crisis reserve that exists at European level. My Flemish counterpart and I collectively asked for this to be activated.
And then there's the climate, of course. Indeed, the Commission has just this week allocated some €120 million to support farmers in 5 member states, Bulgaria, Germany, Estonia, Italy and Romania, who have suffered the consequences of exceptionally adverse weather events that hit back in the spring and early summer. But a number of other member states are requesting urgent help from the crisis reserve too. One of these is Poland, reports Polski Radio, and for the second time this year. According to data from Poland's Agency for the Restructuring and Modernisation of Agriculture, more than 4,300 Polish farmers have been affected by the recent floods, with 3/4 of them losing more than 30% of their production. In Brussels on Monday, the country's agriculture minister, Czesław Siekierski, confirmed that Warsaw had already submitted its application to the fund and would be providing the Commission with more detailed information on its flood damage within the coming weeks.
At the moment, we don't have a record of the losses, because while we know which areas were affected by the floods, we don't know exactly what was lost. It's not just an issue of crop losses due to flooded areas of farmland. There are also losses related to roughage, grain feed, as all the products touched by the floodwater are contaminated.
The Agriculture Crisis Reserve amounts to €450 million a year, but this is fast dwindling. The EU's outgoing Agriculture Commissioner, Janusz Wojciechowski, also a Pole, has urged the European Parliament to press for an increase in the fund in the next multi-annual financial framework, the EU's long-term budget. Romania's farmers are set to receive €21.6 million in the latest distribution of EU aid. But Romanian S&D member Dan Nica believes the economic challenges faced by European farmers call for a far more radical solution than handouts. His comments, made at the last Strasbourg plenary, are shared by our colleagues at Radio Romania.
Atunci când agricultorii din Uniunea Europeană, de la Bruxelles, de la Paris, Strasbourg, până
When farmers around the European Union, in Brussels, Paris, Strasbourg and Bucharest, are out in the streets, something is wrong, deeply wrong. So, to avoid a situation that could very likely see tens of thousands of farmers going bankrupt and the EU's agriculture terribly affected, we need a concrete plan of measures, financial support measures. To survive, these people need financial support from the European Commission to get through this difficult period. They need tax exemptions, which, as you know, can only be decided at European level, so that in this difficult time of huge market distortions, they can survive. We need a new plan, Re-Agriculture EU, along the lines of Repower EU, with money and measures for EU agriculture.
care să fie un fel de Repower EU cu bani și măsuri pentru agricultura Uniunii Europene.
And fellow Romanian Daniel Buda, a member of the EPP group, agrees that the whole system needs rethinking.
The common agricultural policy was not designed to respond to such dynamic realities, nor to cope with consecutive crises. It is essential that farmers have access to efficient insurance schemes, but above all, that reliable credit mechanisms are put in place.
To add insult to injury, many European farmers have also had to contend with livestock losses as a result of increasing wolf activity. At the end of last year, Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said that wolf numbers in some European regions were posing a real danger to livestock. She therefore put forward a proposal to downgrade the once endangered creature's international protection status from strictly protected to protected. At a behind-closed-doors meeting of EU ambassadors on Wednesday, representatives from 21 member states voted in favour of this change. In the end, only 2 countries, Ireland and Spain, are said to have voted against the proposal, with 4 others abstaining. Luxembourg had originally been opposed to lowering the wolf's protection status, but changed sides in solidarity with affected countries, as the country's agriculture minister Martine Hansen explains to 100.7.
We decided to show solidarity by supporting a discussion about the protection status. This does not mean that the wolf will no longer be protected, but its status will be downgraded from strictly protected to protected, so that countries facing problems can act accordingly. I also want to underline that nothing will change in Luxembourg. We don't have a problem here in Luxembourg, so in Luxembourg, the wolf remains protected.
This week's decision will come as a relief to many livestock farmers, but conservationists feel it is a backward step for biodiversity. And last but not least, another troubling issue that is relatively little discussed is the fact that there are fewer and fewer young people entering Europe's agriculture industry. Madis Pārtel, Deputy Secretary-General for Bioeconomy at Estonia's Ministry of Regional Affairs and Agriculture, raises this very issue in an interview with Kuku Radio. In a discussion about the future of European agriculture, Pārtel points out that if we want to ensure Europe can continue to produce food in the years to come, we need to prioritise drawing young people into the industry. Because, as things stand, we are sleepwalking into a food production crisis a few years down the road.
It is true that the average European farmer is still a 50-plus-year-old man. This is a real statistic, and Estonia is not very different in this respect. This country has more young people in agriculture than much of Europe, but the issue remains: how to get more young people into the sector. On the one hand, there are support schemes and incentives that we have put in place to encourage young people to enter the industry. These have certainly not reversed the trend, but we hope change will come about in due course. This said, we need to work just as hard on the softer side. In other words, at the kind of reputation our sector has. If you take a look at a modern farming business, it is really very high-tech. This is a mission-driven job in which you get to produce food. And it's very close to nature too. You get to be at one with the land and with nature. In that sense, it has a lot to offer young people. We just need to talk about this more.
So, we'll close there for today. What will be on the Euranet Plus agenda next week? Join us and find out.